Alexandra Pierce was the young CEO of a well-known retail chain spread across the United States. With her visionary leadership and exceptional management skills, she had transformed the company from a small brand into a retail empire present in most states. Alexandra took great pride in her company's core values: fairness, respect, and serving customers with genuine care. However, she had recently received numerous complaints about discrimination at some of the stores, particularly against customers of color and immigrants. The growing number of complaints was something Alexandra couldn't ignore. Instead of relying solely on internal reports or interviewing employees, she decided to investigate herself. Believing in a hands-on approach, Alexandra disguised herself as an ordinary customer, choosing simple, unassuming clothing. She intentionally let her hair down naturally, wore sunglasses, and carried a plain handbag. She wanted to make sure no one in the store recognized her as the CEO of this famous retail brand. The store Alexandra chose to investigate was managed by Evan Carter, a man with a polished appearance but suspected of showing clear favoritism. Evan was known for being strict with his staff and had a habit of treating different groups of customers differently based on their skin color and how they dressed. Under Evan's supervision was Lisa Thompson, a young employee who often felt pressured to follow the unspoken rules he enforced. Unwilling to just sit behind her desk, Alexandra decided to confront this issue head-on, no matter how shocking the truth might be. Disguised as just another shopper, Alexandra walked into the store, feeling the familiar buzz of customers browsing through aisles. The fluorescent lights gleamed off polished floors, and the air was scented with a mixture of fabric softener and new merchandise. She headed towards the women's clothing section, picking up a few items to blend in. But she wasn't here to shop. She was here to observe. It didn't take long for Alexandra to notice the problem. Evan Carter stood by the customer service desk, his posture confident, his tailored suit sharp. He greeted some customers warmly, offering help with a wide smile. But his attitude changed noticeably when a young Hispanic woman approached with a question about a return. His smile faded, his answers became short and clipped, and he didn't bother to hide his impatience. Alexandra's jaw tightened as she watched the woman leave, looking embarrassed and upset. As Alexandra continued to observe, the pattern became painfully clear. Evan showed the same dismissive attitude to another customer, a black man asking about an out-of-stock item. In contrast, he was overly accommodating to well-dressed white shoppers, even going as far as offering them discounts without being asked. It was blatant favoritism, and Alexandra could feel anger rising in her chest. Her brand stood for inclusivity and respect, yet here was one of her own managers completely disregarding those values. Wanting a closer look, Alexandra approached Lisa Thompson, who was folding clothes nearby. "Excuse me, could you help me find a different size?" she asked, her tone casual. Lisa looked up, her eyes tired but polite. "Of course," she responded, immediately helping Alexandra with a professionalism that seemed almost robotic, as if she were afraid of doing something wrong. While Lisa searched for the size, Alexandra noticed Evan watching them from a distance. His eyes narrowed and his expression hardened. When Lisa returned, Evan quickly walked over, his tone dripping with condescension. "Lisa, don't spend too much time on customers who are just browsing. Focus on the paying ones." The implication was clear, and Alexandra felt a surge of indignation. He was judging her, not as his boss, but as a customer he deemed unworthy of respect. Lisa's face flushed and she mumbled an apology, clearly uncomfortable. Alexandra could see the fear in her eyes, the pressure to conform to Evan's unspoken rules. It was one thing to hear about discrimination through complaints, it was another to witness it firsthand. As she left the store, her hands clenched around her plain handbag. Alexandra knew she couldn't just file a report or issue a warning. This was personal. This was about defending the very values her company was built on. And she wouldn't rest until she confronted the injustice she had witnessed. The next day, Alexandra walked into the store again, this time dressed in the sharp, tailored suit that marked her as CEO. Her heels clicked against the polished floor with purpose, drawing the attention of employees who hurried to stand a little straighter, their faces painted with nervous smiles. Evan Carter's eyes widened when he saw her, his confident demeanor faltering for just a moment before he plastered on his most charming grin. "Ms. Reynolds? I didn't know you were visiting today," he exclaimed, his voice coated with false enthusiasm. Alexandra's expression was unreadable as she shook his hand. "Surprise inspections help me understand how things really work," she replied smoothly, her eyes never leaving his. Evan laughed nervously, clearly unsure of what she had seen the day before. "Absolutely. We always strive to maintain high standards, he said, his words rehearsed. Alexandra's lips curved into a faint smile. I certainly hope so, she murmured, her tone carrying an edge that made his shoulders stiffen. She requested a meeting with the staff, wanting to hear directly from them. As they gathered in the break room, Alexandra observed their body language, rigid postures, hesitant glances, and forced smiles. It was the look of people afraid to speak their truth. She glanced at Evan, who stood by the door, arms crossed, his presence a silent threat. Alexandra's eyes narrowed. She needed to get him out of the room. Evan, I noticed some discrepancies in the inventory report, she lied smoothly. Could you go check on that for me? His face fell slightly, but he nodded, leaving the room with obvious reluctance. The door had barely closed when Alexandra turned back to the staff, her voice softer, more inviting. I want to hear from you. No repercussions. How are things really going here? There was a heavy silence, and Alexandra could see the fear in their faces. Then Lisa Thompson spoke up, her voice trembling. It's difficult, ma'am. Evan, he treats people differently. If you don't look a certain way or if he thinks you're not worth his time, he makes it very hard. Her words were met with nods from others, their faces etched with quiet resentment and exhaustion. One employee recounted how Evan had berated her for helping a black customer too long. Another described how he pressured them to follow shoppers of color more closely, claiming it was company policy. Alexandra's stomach turned as story after story spilled out, each one a testament to the toxic environment Evan had created. Alexandra felt her anger rising, a cold, controlled fury. She had built her brand on principles of equality and respect, yet discrimination was festering within her own store. But more than that, she felt a fierce protectiveness toward these employees who had been enduring Evan's prejudice in silence. Straightening her shoulders, Alexandra spoke firmly, her voice unwavering. Thank you for your honesty. This ends now. The room filled with a new energy, hope mixed with disbelief. Alexandra saw it in their eyes, the spark of possibility. And she knew this was just the beginning of the reckoning Evan Carter was about to face. The following morning, Alexandra summoned Evan to her office. He entered with his usual swagger, clearly unbothered, confident that his charm could smooth over any concern. But when he saw Alexandra's icy gaze, his smirk faltered. She gestured to the chair opposite her desk. Sit, she commanded, her voice devoid of warmth. He obeyed, his posture tense. Alexandra folded her hands neatly, leaning forward. I conducted a thorough review of your store's practices, Evan, she began, her tone measured. And I spoke directly with the staff. They revealed patterns of discrimination under your management, targeting customers and employees alike. She watched his face pale, his mouth opening and closing as he fumbled for words. I don't know what you've been told, but they're exaggerating, he stammered, his confidence crumbling. I treat everyone the same. Do you? Alexandra's voice was sharp, cutting through his feigned innocence. She pulled out the store's customer feedback reports, her manicured fingers flipping through page after page of complaints that detailed racial profiling, dismissive attitudes, and unfair treatment. She didn't need to say a word, the evidence spoke for itself. Evan's eyes widened as he recognized his own handwriting in some of the reports, notes demanding stricter surveillance on shoppers of color, justifications scribbled in the margins. These are your directives, Alexandra said coldly, her eyes never leaving his. Your bias has infected my store, undermining everything this brand stands for. His demeanor shifted, desperation seeping into his voice. I was just trying to prevent theft. You know how it is? He trailed off, realizing too late the implication of his words. Alexandra's jaw tightened. No, Evan. I don't know how it is. I don't assume guilt based on skin color. And neither will anyone who represents my company. She rose from her chair, her figure towering over him. You've humiliated customers and degraded employees because of your prejudice. You abused your power and tarnished this brand's name. I won't allow it any longer. Her words were laced with righteous anger, her eyes blazing. Evan's bravado shattered. He stood, his shoulders slumping. Please, Alexandra. I can change. Give me another chance, he pleaded, his voice hollow. But Alexandra's face was set in stone. You made choices, Evan. Now you face the consequences. She handed him his termination papers, the finality of it sinking in as his hands shook. Clean out your office. Effective immediately. He stumbled toward the door, his defeat palpable. Alexandra watched him go, her expression unyielding. But as the door clicked shut, she allowed herself a breath, the tension in her shoulders easing. Justice wasn't just about firing Evan, it was about restoring dignity to those he'd wronged. Turning to the window, she looked out over the city skyline, her resolve hardening. There was still work to be done. She had to rebuild trust, to show her employees and customers that this brand truly stood for equality. But for the first time since she walked into that store, she felt hope. Real change was coming, and she was ready to lead the charge. In the weeks following Evan's termination, Alexandra embarked on a mission to rebuild the store's shattered trust. She knew this wasn't just about damage control, it was about transforming the company's culture from the inside out. She began by personally meeting with every employee at the downtown branch, listening to their stories, their frustrations, and their hopes for change. She heard about the fear of speaking up, the feeling of invisibility, and the resentment that had simmered under Evan's oppressive leadership. Each conversation weighed heavily on her, igniting a determination to right the wrongs that had festered for too long. To lead by example, Alexandra implemented mandatory diversity and inclusion training across all stores, starting with herself. She made sure the curriculum wasn't just a box to check but an immersive experience that challenged biases and fostered empathy. She also launched an anonymous feedback system, empowering employees to report issues without fear of retaliation. For the first time, voices that had been silenced were given a platform, and Alexandra made it clear that she was listening. But she didn't stop there. Alexandra introduced new hiring practices to diversify the management pipeline, ensuring that leadership reflected the communities they served. She partnered with local organizations to recruit talent from underrepresented backgrounds, breaking down barriers that had kept the workplace homogeneous for far too long. She was committed to nurturing a culture where everyone, regardless of race or background, felt valued and respected. The impact was palpable. Employees began to engage more openly, contributing ideas and challenging outdated norms. The energy in the store shifted from tense and guarded to vibrant and collaborative. Customers noticed the change too. Regulars who had once felt alienated began returning, sharing stories of positive interactions and fair treatment. Sales slowly climbed, but more importantly, the store regained its reputation as a welcoming, inclusive space. One afternoon, as Alexandra walked the store floor, she saw Mia confidently assisting a customer, her shoulders squared and her smile genuine. The transformation was unmistakable. Alexandra approached her and Mia's eyes lit up. "Thank you," Mia said, her voice firm. "For seeing us. For fighting for us." Alexandra's throat tightened, emotion threatening to spill over. "I should have seen sooner," she admitted, her voice soft. "But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." As she looked around the store, Alexandra felt a surge of pride. It wasn't just about fixing what was broken, it was about building something better, something enduring. Her journey undercover had revealed painful truths, but it had also given her the clarity to lead with purpose. Standing in the heart of the store she now fully understood, Alexandra knew her work was far from over. But this was just the beginning. With renewed resolve, she committed to cultivating a legacy of justice, equality, and respect. This brand, her brand, would stand for more than just products. It would stand for people. And that was a vision worth fighting for. Months after implementing the changes, Alexandra stood before a packed auditorium at the company's annual leadership summit. It was the first time she'd addressed her team since the revelations at the downtown store. Her heart raced, but she steadied herself, determined to speak her truth. She shared her undercover experience, not as a gimmick but as a confession. She admitted her blind spots, her failure to see the struggles her employees faced, and the pain her ignorance had caused. The room was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. But she also spoke of the courage she witnessed, of Mia's resilience, and the determination of countless employees who showed up every day despite the injustices they faced. Alexandra outlined the changes she had made: mandatory diversity training, the anonymous feedback system, and the new hiring practices aimed at creating a more inclusive leadership pipeline. She emphasized that these weren't just policies but commitments to justice and respect. Her voice wavered as she declared, "We will be better because we must be better." She didn't sugarcoat the challenges ahead, nor did she promise perfection. Instead, she pledged accountability, her own included. As she concluded, the room erupted in applause. Alexandra felt a wave of relief but also responsibility. This was only the beginning. She looked out at her team, seeing their faces, some tear-streaked, others filled with hope. She knew the road to change would be long and complicated, but she was ready to walk it with them. Together they would rebuild not just a brand but a culture rooted in respect and equality. The story of Alexandra's journey teaches us the power of empathy and accountability in leadership. It reminds us that true change begins with acknowledging our blind spots and actively seeking to understand the experiences of others. In life and business, it's not enough to have good intentions. We must also have the courage to face uncomfortable truths and take meaningful action. This story illustrates the importance of listening to those affected by injustice and empowering them to help shape solutions. It also highlights that accountability isn't about blame but about responsibility and growth. In our daily lives, we can apply these lessons by being more attentive to others' struggles, questioning our own assumptions, and advocating for fairness wherever we have influence. Change is difficult, but with humility and perseverance, it's possible to create a more inclusive and just environment for everyone.